President Trump had a busy week last week. What are your thoughts?
Well, we're in kind of a strange place. See, I think most of us are used to the fact that politicians, when they get elected, really don't mean anything they said. And if they deliver on anything, it's astonishing. This guy seems to want to deliver on everything all at once, so it's a little bit, a little bit punch drunk. I mean, his dealing with the press has been somewhat, from my way of thinking, unsatisfactory. But I was reading something interesting, which pointed out how he keeps getting the press to catch themselves up in lies. So, for instance, there was this big list of the Muslim countries that we're not supposed to be taking people in from. And everyone pointed out, oh, you see, he leaves out the countries that he himself has business dealings with, like Saudi Arabia and Egypt and all that. And then it's released that the list of Muslim no-go countries was actually compiled by Obama.
Wow.
And the theory that the one guy has is that he's doing this on purpose, and he's setting these people up to make themselves look bad. Now, that would take a level of I don't know whether to say deceit or cunning or intelligence, but whatever it is, would take a level of that I certainly have never seen in a public figure before. And if true, we're certainly not seeing it in the media, who seem to be falling for it every time. The thing with the Martin Luther King bust.
Yeah. But
he does come across as ultra-sensitive, and as petty.
Yeah.
And they're sort of going to play that for all it's worth. Maybe he is petty, I don't know. Part of the problem you have, and you see this in a lot of figures, you see it with the Holy Father, you see it with all sorts of people, is that leaders of this generation feel the need to express themselves. And, it's the whole boomer thing, I've got to be me, I've got to be open and all. Well, maybe not. Maybe sometimes less is more. You don't really need to hear from the Pope or the President every second. Your life will continue without constant guidance from above. But at any rate, it doesn't really matter. The big question with him is not, at the end of the day, going to be how he appears. It will be what he does. He's going to be naming his Supreme Court nominee shortly. We'll see if he appoints somebody along the lines of what he's promised. I see no reason for him not to.
What are your realistic expectations from Trump?
I have none.
Okay, well, what would you be content? Like, I mean, what are you looking for from him? I mean, realistically.
Realistically speaking, for me to become a Trump supporter and a flag waver, there are three basic things that he'd have to do, and I have a lot of friends who think he's the devil incarnate. I have a lot who think he's the God Emperor of Doom. Myself, if he does these three things, I'll actually vote for him in 4 years. The first is to appoint sufficient justices who will knock down Roe v. Wade. Okay. Now, that of course would mean that it would go back to the states. And that would mean nothing in California, of course, because here we've never seen an abortion we didn't like. That's why we have the governor we have. But, was that called for, really? Anyway, but the second thing that I would expect out of him is a real ending of our difficulties with Russia and real partnership in terms of doing an ISIS. That's very, very important to me. The third, and this is I'm a bit worried about, and that is dealing appropriately with Mexico. They have a very delicate system down there. And the last thing we need, and I'm afraid, if he really makes good on jacking up tariffs on them and all that, the last thing we need down there is an imitation Hugo Chavez.
Yes, I read that the the president's opposition party is vigilantly anti-American,
Yeah.
and that in Trump's hard dealings with Mexico this past week, it's sort of stoking that anti-American fire.
You see, again, it's important to bear in mind that Mexico has a very long and unpleasant history with us. There's an old saying in Mexico, poor little Mexico, so far from God and so close to the United States. And it's justified. The truth is that the real black mark in our history has always been our dealing with Latin America. That is, our history as an independent country.
Yeah.
We have always backed the anti-Catholic side in any dispute down there, whether it was Mexico or Venezuela or anywhere else that we could affect. We have always treated them like third-rate citizens, third-rate folks, and you know, that always comes back to bite us in unpleasant places. It's why it is that between the wars, the various quasi and pro, etc., fascist groups had a big hearing down there. It's why in the 60s and 70s communism got so big, liberation theology and all that. We have to come to terms with the fact that our relationship with Latin America and with Mexico in particular has always been rather abusive. Now, that doesn't mean that we shouldn't be realistic about our needs versus theirs.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that. I'm not saying we should have open borders. I'm not saying we should have free immigration. As I've said in other venues other times, I don't like commenting on the immigration issue because neither side is being honest.
Yeah.
And as long as there's that lack of honesty, there's no point in talking about it. But that's not something I expect out of Mr. Trump. I don't expect him to address our demographic problem. I mean, if the church won't, you can't expect the state to.
Of course.
So, those are my three requirements. Just to briefly recap: out with Roe v. Wade, a reordering in a positive manner of our relationship with Russia, and be dealing with ISIS, and lastly but not leastly, an appropriate regularization of our relationship with Mexico. And again, you know, it's hard because the Mexicans jump up and down about how nasty their immigrants are treated here when they're draconian toward their Central American immigrants.
Yeah.
And they build a partial wall along the border with Guatemala. Now, if I were president of the United States, I would simply say, you know what, we're going to adopt your immigration laws. And if you want them to change, you change them in Mexico City, we'll change them in D.C. It'll be a weird suicide pact. And then the both of us will jump off Lover's Leap.